It's a violation of the rights of Filipino fisherfolk to earn a livelihood. It's a violation of the rights of the future generations of Filipinos to the sovereign rights under the exclusive economic zone.
Hello and welcome to Perspectives with Nilo, a regular podcast where we cover news and views from around the world. I'm your host, Neil O'Sullivan. In our last episode entitled China's Maritime Aggression, we reviewed China's relations with its neighbours and in particular the Philippines, including the recent clashes between China's Coast Guard and Philippine vessels at Second Thomas Shoal in the West Philippine Sea. I'd highly recommend that you go back and check that out first if you haven't already done so. You can find it and all of our past episodes at our blog site at pwnilo.com or wherever you get your podcasts. In this episode, we bring you the latest in this evolving story. We share more insights into China's tactics and discuss how China's ongoing aggression is driving its neighbours to take a stand and form alliances. Plus, how close do you think China's warships get to Europe? Stay tuned, you might be surprised. In our last episode, we concluded with the news that in late July it was reported that China and the Philippines had reached an understanding on the provisional arrangement for resupply missions in the South China Sea. Beijing and Manila had been locked in a tense standoff in recent months as China continues to press claims to almost the entire South China Sea, despite a 2016 International Tribunal ruling that its assertion has no legal basis. It was hoped that this recent agreement would help to smooth relations between China and the Philippines and thereby bring more stability to the region. However, many analysts had cast doubt on whether the temporary deal between Manila and Beijing would be successful, and unfortunately, events since late July are proving that their doubts were not misplaced. On July 27th, the Philippines completed their first unimpeded South China Sea resupply mission to the Sierra Madre at Second Thomas Shoal. However, in the days that followed, both Beijing and Manila took issue with the framing and characterization of what had been agreed in the so-called deal. Then, on July 31st, Beijing launched a series of military exercises in the South China Sea. These included the dispatching of two People's Liberation Army or PLA drones to circumnavigate Taiwan from opposite directions, believed to be a first maneuver of its kind in the area. Japan reported these PLA drones close to its outlying islands as well as a Chinese Y-9 reconnaissance aircraft travelling from the East China Sea and passing between Okinawa Main Island and Miyako Island. It then flew towards Yonaguni Island before turning around and heading back through the same route to the East China Sea. In response, the Japan Air Self-Defense Forces Southwest Air Division scrambled fighter jets to address the situation. In addition, during the first week of August, China conducted small arms training, artillery exercises and amphibious landing drills, as well as a rocket launch off the coast of Hainan Island, about 500 kilometers south of Taiwan. China's PLA Navy carrier, the CNS Shandong, was also spotted south of Hainan during these activities. Coincidentally, on July 31st, US and Philippine warships had met up near the disputed Leslie Bank, a maritime feature within Manila's exclusive economic zone, to conduct a joint maritime patrol. According to the US Navy, the joint patrol was meant to demonstrate the strength of the alliance between the two nations and further advance combined capabilities in the maritime domain, which support peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific. While most of Beijing's recent aggressions have been focused on the Philippines, it has also found ways to antagonize Vietnam through intrusive Coast Guard patrols and oceanographic surveys that telegraph its sovereignty claims to most of Vietnam's exclusive economic zone. This is according to Ray Powell, who is the director of Stanford's University Gordian Knot Center for National Security Innovation. In two such exercises on August 2nd and 7th, China dispatched drones into Vietnam's airspace just off its coast. These flights took place a few days after Hanoi announced it would hold its first joint Coast Guard exercises with the Philippines, which were planned to start on August 9th, and followed Vietnam's submission of a claim to the United Nations last month to extend its continental shelf in the South China Sea. Vu Duc Can, a law professor at the University of Ottawa who follows Vietnamese policies and its international relations, suggested that China's actions are aimed at disrupting regional cooperation, as the joint Vietnam-Philippines drills mark a significant step in mutual support against China's expansionist activities. And while Vietnam and the Philippines have their own territorial dispute, they have wisely decided to manage their bilateral dispute amicably so that they can focus on the much greater threat posed by China, according to Ray Powell. On August 7th, China's PLA Southern Theatre Command also conducted a joint patrol near Huangyan Island, the Chinese name for the Scarborough Shoal in the South China Sea. The activity was aimed at what they called testing the command's reconnaissance, rapid mobility and joint strike capabilities. Also on August 7th, the Armed Forces of the Philippines, or AFP, in collaboration with the Armed Forces of Australia, Canada and the United States, conducted a pre-planned 2-day multilateral maritime cooperative activity in the Western Command, within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. General Romeo Browner Jr., Chief of Staff of the AFP, lauded the exercise, emphasizing its importance in strengthening regional security and fostering cooperation with their ally and international partners. In a press release, he stated, "This multilateral exercise underscores the commitment of our nations to ensuring peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific region. The multilateral maritime cooperative activity highlights the robust defence relationships and the unwavering commitment of the participating nations to upholding international maritime security and promoting a free and open Indo-Pacific." And just when you thought things couldn't get any more tense, focus switched to the skies over the South China Sea. On August 8, 2024, the Philippines Air Force was conducting a routine maritime patrol over the area known as Scarborough Shoal, when 2 aircraft from China's PLA Air Force executed a dangerous maneuver and dropped flares in the path of the Philippines aircraft. A video of the event showing the view from the Philippines aircraft cockpit was posted on social media. The Philippines responded strongly to the PLA action, stating in a press release that the National Task Force for the West Philippine Sea strongly condemns the irresponsible, unprofessional, illegal and dangerous acts of the People's Liberation Army Air Force that harassed a Philippine Air Force patrol aircraft on August 8th in the skies near Scarborough Shoal. The Philippines statement continued that, without any provocation or justifiable cause, 2 PLA Air Force aircraft conducted dangerous maneuvers in close proximity to a Philippines Air Force aircraft conducting a routine patrol mission. The PLA planes deliberately deployed flares near the PAF aircraft, risking the safety of its Filipino crew. The PAF NC-212I aircraft, a general transporter, never posed a threat to the PLA Air Force jets. By launching flares in the flight path of the PAF plane, the PLA Air Force fighters exhibited hazardous intent. The Philippines has called on the government of the People's Republic of China to cease all forms of provocative and hazardous acts that could undermine the safety of Filipino military and civilian personnel in the waters or in the skies, destabilize regional peace, and erode the trust and confidence of the international community in the PRC. This was the reaction of senior Philippine government officials, starting with Defense Secretary Gilberto Teodoro at a press conference shortly after the incident.
Consistent pattern ng behavior ng China ito. They will stick to their narrative na alam natin there is no international support whatsoever. All they have on their side is brute force, no, and strength and might, and that's what they're gonna do. Hopefully, they listen to reason and heed the appeals of not only the Philippines, but other countries to temper their moves and act in accordance with international law. No? I do not think it's alarming. It is a response that we should need to be acclimated to.
Do you consider this as violation of IHS?
Well, of course. You know why? It's a violation of the rights of Filipino fisherfolk to earn a livelihood. It's a violation of the rights of the future generations of Filipinos to the sovereign rights under the exclusive economic zone, and perhaps even the continental shelf.
What does this say about China's sincerity in terms of de-escalating the tensions? What does this say about China's sincerity in terms of de-escalating the tensions?
China has always said it's wanted to de-escalate, but every time, of course, na may nangyayari na ganito, certainly it tends to raise tensions. So it's something that certainly we have to pay close attention to. But yun ang sinasabi nila, we'll have to see if they can really help in maintaining a more stable relationship para mag-de-escalate ng konti ang tensions. But every time something like this happens, siyempre you begin to think.
Will this affect the ongoing negotiations? Will this affect the ongoing
negotiations on
talks on de-escalation?
Hindi, of course, tayo, Pilipinas, we're committed. We've always said to try and settle kung anong disputes or whatever through diplomatic and peaceful means. We will continue. It's up to China whether they will.
Secretary, after the BCF, parang tingin nyo ba bad faith itong mga nangyayari na?
Well, ang sabi ni Secretary, these things are bound to happen. Kaya that's why we talk. But certainly, sinabi ko, we reached an understanding the other week and then mangyayari ito. So naturally, it's something we have to really consider.
Do you think it's bad faith at this point?
Well, I don't know why they did it. Yun ang masabi ko. It certainly took us by surprise.
Well, it's really very dangerous, no? Yung ginawa po nilang maneuvers na yon are very dangerous. In fact, bawal nga yung ganong kalapit at yung maglabas ng flares, no? In the path of another aircraft. That is wrong. Very dangerous, illegal po yung ginawa nilang maneuvers na yon. That is dangerous and provocative.
Philippine Armed Forces Chief of Staff General Romeo Browner Jr., together with his colleagues Foreign Affairs Secretary Enrico Manalo and Defence Secretary Gilberto Teodoro, giving their reaction to the encounter of the Philippines Air Force with China's People's Liberation Army Air Force over Scarborough Shoal on August 8th last. As we mentioned earlier and in the previous episode, Beijing claims almost all of the South China Sea, including the Scarborough Shoal, which has angered neighbouring countries that dispute the boundaries claimed by China, which they say cut into their exclusive economic zones. China rejects a 2016 ruling by the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague that Beijing's expansive claims had no basis under international law. Earlier, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning said in response to the Philippine-Japan-US partnership that, quote, China strongly opposes the practice of bloc politics by relevant countries. We firmly oppose any acts that stoke and drive up tensions and harm other countries' strategic security and interests. We are seriously against forming exclusive groupings in this region. Certain countries keep seeking backing from non-regional countries as they infringe on China's sovereignty and rights and make provocations at sea. What they have done has escalated the tensions. A certain country outside the region keep fueling the flame and stoking confrontation. End quote. Meanwhile, we have learned that as a result of China's dangerous interception of the Philippines transport plane on August 8th, the Philippines are now considering engaging their fighter jets to escort their patrol planes in the future. In a related story, the increased presence and activity of what China calls its research vessels in the territorial waters of countries in the region is also sparking concern. China has been investing heavily in what it calls scientific research in the South China Sea in recent years, opening up a new front in its push to establish sovereignty in the areas as tensions with its neighbouring countries have escalated. Earlier in the week, it was reported that a Chinese research vessel intruded into Malaysia's exclusive economic zone to do unauthorized research in those waters. Chinese research vessels have previously been observed circling around shoals and reefs in the South China Sea and encroaching into the exclusive economic zones of both the Philippines and Vietnam. It's not clear what exact surveys are being carried out by China, but speculation is that China is collecting data on undersea cable paths, natural resources, mineral research, and so on, not unlike the behaviour in the Atlantic by Russia. However, it is generally understood that under the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea, exploring another country's exclusive economic zone requires that country's permission that China would appear not to have sought. And finally, to our question of how close do you think China's warships get to Europe? On the weekend of August 11th, 2 Chinese warships were observed sailing south from the North Sea and traversing the English Channel. The vessels in question were a 7,500-ton destroyer and a 23,000-ton supply ship, and this was their second time passing through this area in the past 3 weeks. On this occasion, they were returning from the Russian Navy Day celebrations in St. Petersburg in July and were closely monitored by Belgian, French and UK navies. Chinese Navy ships do not often travel through the English Channel. A Chinese destroyer was previously monitored in 2019 during travel to and from a similar event in Russia. To conclude then on our main topic, what's really interesting about the situation in the Indo-Pacific is that China's expansionist behaviour in the region is driving its neighbours to build stronger relationships and alliances with each other. This in turn is making China more aggressive as it strives not to lose face in front of its domestic audience. Furthermore, China's narrative that it is a peaceful superpower and that it is America's influence in the region that is stirring up trouble is becoming less and less believable. I recently listened to a very interesting interview on the Facts First podcast with Christian Esquera. He spoke to David Nye, a journalist who spent a decade as editor of the Global Times, a propaganda newspaper of China's Communist Party. One of the interesting insights David shared was that, in his opinion, the Chinese Communist Party often gets more aggressive as their domestic woes increase. As we know, China's economy has been suffering recently. Their domestic property market, which was fundamental to the economy, has collapsed, unemployment is so high that they've stopped reporting the data, and consumer sentiment is at an all-time low. It's very likely that these latest clashes with the Philippines and ongoing grey warfare against neighbouring countries are smokescreens to distract from their faltering economy. If you'd like to find out more about David Nye's interview and the topics covered in this episode, we've placed additional information in the Dive Deeper section of our blog at pwnilo.com. There you'll also find links to our social media, and we'd really appreciate it if you could show your support in the form of a like, follow or subscribe, or by sharing our podcast with your friends and family. If you'd like to be added to our exclusive mailing list to receive advance notice and special updates, then please click on the subscribe link on our blog site and follow the instructions. But that's where we leave it for the moment. As always, thank you for listening, and until next time, slán agus beannacht.